All right. Hi, Lindy.
Hi, how are you?
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you and to hear more of your story, because I actually don't know a whole lot, surprisingly, because we've hung out a lot and we've talked about a lot of different things, but I don't think I've got like all the details. So how about you just share like whatever you want to share?
So I'm Lindy Johnson. I was born and raised in Seattle area, Bremerton, more specifically. Huge Seahawks fan, love football. I graduated from high school and moved to Utah to kind of like get a fresh start kind of a thing, and met my husband like probably within 6 months. And then
you were like how old?
I was 18 when I met my husband.
Okay.
Yep. And then we were married about a year and a half later, almost 2 years later, and got married in the temple and started having kids and did the whole thing. Yeah. So
and then what happened?
So about 3 years ago, I was just like scrolling through Facebook and saw this really interesting article that linked me to the Gospel Topics essays on the church website, and a lot of information I had never heard before. So kind of jumped down the rabbit hole, and away I went.
How did that go? Was it like a long process, or was it just kind of like a sudden like, oh my gosh, like?
It was both. So I was like really startled and shocked. The article that I had first read was about like multiple accounts of the first vision, and so like I had only heard of one version. So I was really like, I was honestly like so surprised by it that I was like, Mike, who's my husband, was like, have you ever heard about this? And he actually was like, don't talk to me about that. I don't want to hear anything about that. And so for about the next year and a half, I did a really deep dive into, podcasts and books and articles and, all the things.
What podcast?
Primarily Mormon Stories podcast.
How did you find it? I'm always curious to know how people happen upon it.
So I don't even remember how I found it. I think I probably just wanting to have that curiosity of like, what else don't I know? Typed in multiple accounts of the first vision, and I'm guessing that probably Mormon Stories podcast probably came up. And,
in searching.
And then just I primarily focused on all the like historically or truth claim type podcast first. I had kind of struggled with social issues like my whole life growing up in Seattle. It's very liberal. So LGBTQ, went to high school with a lot of those kinds of people, and it was very, so I was socially, I always like had issues with that kind of stuff. And so I knew that already. So when I wanted to know more about like, what else don't I know, I focused on the truth claim stuff. And so watched a lot of podcasts about, DNA and Book of Abraham and, all of that stuff.
So all this time you still weren't able to bring it up?
No, so I, tried to be respectful of him not wanting to talk about the information and look at the information. And so any podcast that I was listening to, I tried to have like earbuds in or like watch it when he wasn't home. But he came home one time and I was watching a podcast, and I think it was the one with Hans Matson and Brigitte in it, and he was very intrigued by it, and he through watching, listening, heard that, John Dehlin was very neutral and, was not incredibly critical of the church. And so he, through that one podcast episode, was kind of piqued his interest. And so then he kind of started listening to things on his own. And then it actually was about a year ago, I saw that he was reading the CES letter on his desktop. And so I was like, oh my goodness, I really was. And I know I shouldn't be, because it's such a hard thing to go through. But I really was just like,
but for you to have to go through it on your own, and then for him to finally be on the same page, or at least
starting to get on that,
so that you can actually have conversations about it. I bet that was exciting.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it truly was. And then about 2 months later, we went to a faith crisis. Well, I went to a faith crisis workshop in Orem. And it was like the first time I had ever been around other people that had gone through the same thing as me. And the pain was so similar, and it just created this really amazing bond. And I was really just wanted to do more. And so then I found Mormon Enlightenment, because one of the other members in Mormon Enlightenment was at that faith crisis workshop. And so he added me to the group. And so that's why I found Mormon Enlightenment.
Oh, that's cool to hear how you came upon that as well, because I didn't know that either. Yeah. So then when you guys, did you ever experience anything real intense, like the dark night of the soul, or like what was the transition like for you? Were you upset? Were you scared? Yeah, so part of the time that I was going through my faith crisis and transition, I was pregnant, and so I was very like hyper emotional. And it took me a lot longer, I think, to process where I wanted to land with the information that I was reading, whether I wanted to, continue going to church, if I decided it wasn't for me. I had landed on kind of on the non-believing side, but, being pregnant and then just having a new baby, like it was actually really difficult. With what? My last baby. Yeah, so he's almost 2, so like 1.5 actually. And with my other babies, when I would like nurse, I would sing primary songs. And with my youngest, just every time I would nurse him, I would find myself wanting to sing those same primary songs, and like A Child's Prayer, or Heavenly Father loves me, I'm a child of God, like things like that. And those songs were just, at that time, were so incredibly triggering for me that I would just end up sobbing through it, and it just was so difficult, and I would just burst into tears at random times. Just things would, just trigger me, and I just burst into tears. And I just remember, sitting there rocking my youngest and just being like, if I'm wrong about this, like if I'm, if there's any chance that this is true, just give me a sign, just any kind of a sign. I just need to know if I'm making the right choice. And I never got an answer, and so I just kind of had to rely on my gut instincts and all the information that I had. And if something's true, it doesn't matter what you throw against it, it stands up, like it's the truth. And it just wasn't like that, so I just decided to leave. Were you like alone in this feeling at the time, feeling those emotions with your baby, and were you not able to share that with your husband yet? Yeah, so even after let's see here. So Jet was born in May of 2018, and I remember like being like still like processing the information, or my feelings, I guess, because I had decided that I no longer believed in the truth claims of the church. Like I had landed there by the time my son was born. And obviously the discussion of baby blessings is it's the first thing you do when you have a baby. You bless them. And Mike was not on the same page yet. He hadn't even begun to look at church history stuff. You experience things, I think, a little bit differently, and there's even some disagreement between he and I whether or not I had even tried to talk to him about the information at that point or not, because I knew I actually really didn't want to bless him. And we kind of talked about like not blessing him, but it was never a conversation that really kind of went anywhere. It just was like, whether or not Mike was going to be the one to do the blessing, because we had actually taken a step back from church also. So we hadn't been attending regularly. And so he was, kind of trying to decide whether or not he should even bless Jet. And so we ended up asking Mike's dad to do the blessing. But it wasn't until, I guess it would have been the end of October, first part of November last year. So Jet was like 9 months old before he was even looking at church history stuff or podcasting or whatever. Yeah. What's life like now? Like, what is some positive aspects of leaving the church? Because it is so
it's a
challenging, gift. It's difficult, but it also is a gift.
Yeah.
So what is the best part about experience?
I think honestly the best part, which is also kind of the hardest part in a way, is just getting to live authentically. Like I can unapologetically be me, and sometimes that's hard because, you know, some people don't like that. But I love that. I love being able to, you know, love and also be able to love everyone around me regardless of, you know, whether or not I can see their shoulders, or whether or not they smell like cigarette smoke, or what, you know, what their race or gender or sexual orientation. And it just, you know, it's so wonderful to be able to just truly feel like this endless capacity of love for those around me. And it's not based upon, you know, am I going to get, you know, my banking celestial blessings? Am I checking off boxes monthly? You know, it's just if I'm giving service and loving people because I want to, not because I'm afraid of what the consequences are going to be if I don't. And I love that. So being authentic and loving people, it's pretty awesome.
It feels like the list goes on and on and on. Like this is like one of the most challenging experiences I think one will experience, coming out of such an intense religion. But it almost makes you appreciate all these things like intensified, you know. It's like we would have never known how amazing living a normal life would be if we hadn't have had the opposite, you know, or such contrast. So, well, thank you so much, Lindy.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I loved hearing a portion of your story. I know all of our stories are, you know, much longer than 15 minutes, but it is fun to really kind of get a little inside look into others' lives and know that we're not alone, and be able to hear the positive takeaways from this challenging experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. He's back.
I know.